Good morning, everybody. I will talk about the word seen from Asia through the example of maps of Asian cartographies. And I would like to start with a quote. What more wonderful journey there can be than to follow the old caravan routes right across Asia or from India to China via Turkestan and Xinjiang. I am filled with regret when I think that perhaps I shall never have the time or the opportunity to undertake this long, arduous, and yet leisurely journey. For many years, I have gazed at the map of Asia and traced these routes traversed by famous travelers. I have read many books about these travels and sought to satisfy thereby my own wanderlust. Asia fascinates me. The long past of Asia, the achievements of Asia through millennia of history, the troubled present of Asia, and the future that is taking shape almost before our eyes. Perhaps if I actually visit many of the places in Asia about which I have read so much, I would be disappointed, for the old glory has departed, and often where a proud culture flourished, only a backward desert now remains. It is more satisfying to see ruins which the imagination can fill as it chooses. So this text is written by Jawaharlal Nehru as a foreword to Krishna Menon's work entitled Delhi Chunking, a travel diary published in 1947. And Nehru, as you know, of course, the father of modern India, was fascinated by Asia, notably through maps and as well through travelers' stories, travelers' diaries. Here in this text, he offers us an alternative genealogy to classical historiography. In fact, according to classical historiography, according to the Western historiography, the origin of the world, Asia, was popularized by European scholars. It seems to come from the Hittite word Assuwa, A-S-S-U-W-A, which means Anatolia. And this word Assuwa was transformed by the Greeks into Asia, which designated originally Anatolia and beyond that Assyria. So this word was transmitted by European Jesuits from the end of the 16th century, and this geographical category was gradually adopted from the end of the 19th century by the Asian intellectuals, the Indian one, the Chinese one, the Vietnamese one, etc. Because these Asian elites were at this time seduced by a new ideology, which is Pan-Asianism. Pan-Asianism, who claimed a culture and a religious matrix, a matrix derived in particular from Buddhism, a matrix partly common. And these Asian intellectuals were united within the framework of the fight against Western colonialism and Western imperialism. But as Jawaharlal Nehru reminds us, this Asia dreamed of by 20th century Asians does not only come from a 16th century European invention. It is also inspired by the numerous wanderings and the numerous descriptions of Indian monks and Chinese explorers who, from the beginning of the first millennium, drew the contours, drew the frontiers of a continent corresponding to what we call also the Far East. So Jawaharlal Nehru, clearly understood the extraordinary power of maps. The singular power of the map lies in its very format. You know, the map allows you to encompass vast territories and understand complex questions at a single glance. Without cartographic representation, there is no feeling of the globality of the world. The planisphere does not represent the Earth, it creates the world. It creates the world by showing an invisible planet in its entirety, because you have to remember that the planet was invisible before the first satellite image of the so-called blue marble. This first image was captured by the crew of Apollo 17 in 1972. So, in fact, the map alone displays before our eyes the infinite diversity of the planet that words struggle to describe. So, this incredible power of maps was put at the service of European countries. In fact, for these Western countries, the map is the ideal tool for appropriation, for physical and symbolic appropriation of the world. The maps, in fact, convey toponymic violence through the renaming of place names, rivers, towns, countries, using European words, and of course erasing vernacular names. So cartography would therefore be the prerogative of Europe, where it flourished in the form of an exact science from the 18th century, at the expense of other cartographic traditions, as we will see in a few seconds. So at this time, the Paris meridian became the axis of the world maps until the adoption of the Greenwich meridian in London during the Washington Conference in 1884, which ratified British dominance in the world. So at this time, geography and cartography became colonial sciences par excellence. As you can notice on the left side, every British and French students can also admire on the world maps in their school. During the 19th century and the 20th century, they can admire the omnipresence of their colonial empire, flatteringly represented by vast red and pink coloring, signifying a continuous, a uniform, and a total domination of imperial power over vast overseas spaces. So this is the red on the map. The red on the map, popularized by textbooks and advertisements, greatly impresses public opinion in Europe and influences the collective imagination. However, the map, as you know, the map is not the territory. And on the ground, colonial influence is exercised in a very uneven manner. In fact, all these territories colored in red are not actually controlled by the colonizers, because the colonizers are too few in number. As evidenced by this much lesser known map on the right. This map is entitled Political Divisions of the Indian Empire. And thanks to this map, we understand at a glance the complexity and singularity of the colonial situation in India during the 19th and 20th centuries. Because thanks to this change of scale, thanks to this focus on India, we can see alongside the red British India, we can discover an Indian India made up, as you know, of 562 princely states, which covered 2/5 of the territory and hosted 25% of its total population. So since then, historiography, adopting a colonial tropism, which is in part of the continuity of the Mughal centrism of the modern era, which has tended to neglect the importance of these vast territories. So we can find many other examples of this red on the map in other contexts, always with a reference to India. Here is a map of this is a map by Henrique Galvão, a Portuguese cartographer. This is a map printed on a very popular postcard from 1939. And you can admire on these postcards the representation of Goa in Europe, right next to Portugal, at the heart of Spain. So Western maps, starting with the planispheres, Western maps distort reality. Why is that? Because cartography, is the most obvious and common way of representing the globe. But this way of representing the globe cannot be faithfully. It cannot be faithfully reproduced on a flat surface, because the planet is a sphere, of course. So, and yet, in the wake of the mathematical sciences, Western maps have pretended to objectivity, with an appearance of naturalness and transparency that has masks their limitation. And there are a lot of limitation in modern so-called scientific Western cartographies. For instance, the choice of projection, the inevitable distortion, the centering and the cropping, etc. So it is well known, and this contemporary work of art demonstrates it perfectly. This is a painting by a Congolese artist named Cherry Samba, very, very famous Congolese artist, Samba, and his work is entitled La vraie carte du monde, the real map of the world. It is a canvas produced in 2011, and this work disorients spectators by reversing north and south. It thereby manifests an incontestable truth. Cartography is all about conventions, and cartography uses arbitrary conventions like north and south that make no sense in the vacuum of space, of course. But you have to think about it. There is no north and no south. So in this work, The artist represents himself at the art of the paintings and places Africa at the top and center of its painting. The artist abandons the traditional projection used by Western cartographers. This is the Mercator projection, which tends to oversize temperate zones. That means that the traditional Western projection, the Mercator one, tends to oversize Europe in every maps. So Thierry Samba decided to choose another projection, the Peters projection, which restores a fairer proportion of the surface of the different continents, notably Africa and South America. So I looked for an Indian example of, this kind of cartographic decentration, or rather refocusing on India. And I found this wonderful Air India advertisement. It's from 1965, and it is a promotional map showing the service area of Air India on a paper fan, probably for distribution to passengers. The map uses an unusual projection in the shape of a lotus leaf, which efficiently accommodates the shape of the fan and draws Air India's major routes. So every map is created from a particular point of view, most often with the creator's society at the center of the world, or with the center defined in accordance with the society's beliefs about the universe origins. For example, the Mappae Mundi, the world maps created in Christian world in the Middle Ages, were often drawn with the holy city of, which city? Jerusalem. Jerusalem, at the very center of this map, for example. Numerous other visions of the world and its centers exist elsewhere, and as you know, many Arab Muslim maps place Mecca at the center, at the heart of the world, Mecca, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad. But what about Asia? For instance, Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist maps locate the center of the world in the Himalayas, and more specifically on the mythological Mount Meru. These maps often depict a religious universe ordered by the separation between the world of man and the world of gods and demons, between known territories and imaginary realms. Forming a bridge between these worlds is the axis mundi, the pillar of the world. The pillar of the world, which may take a variety of forms, such as a tree, a mountain, or a lake. In Jainism, between the heavens above and the hell below is the middle world where mortals dwell. The middle world, which is represented as a series of concentric circles around a central continent, which is the Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is the island continent of the rose apple tree. Its territory corresponds more or less with the Indian continent, the Jambudvipa, with the mythical Mount Meru at its axis, around which the Earth pivots. This central continent is encircled by a vast ocean, rich in aquatic life, which is surrounded by another continent, which is in turn encircled by a second ocean, and finally bordered by an outer continent. So, images of this ensemble, called Adavidpapata, adorn Jain temples, serving to encourage meditation. So, in Hindu cosmology too, Jambudvipa is the land of man, part of the universe contained within the cosmic egg of Brahma. At its heart, linking all worlds, is Mount Meru, where the gods dwell. At Meru's summit is the sources of the Ganges, which flows over the hair of the god Shiva before coursing down the Himalayas. So this mountain can be found at the center of mythological representation of the world beyond the Indian subcontinent, including Southeast Asia and Japan. Hindu and Buddhist temples symbolize it in their architecture, such as the building of Borobudur in Java, as you can see on the screen, but also the Wat Arun in Bangkok. And within the architectural complex of Cambodia Angkor, the temple mountains are organized around a central pyramid that represents the sacred Mount Meru. So these cosmographic traditions attest to another view of the universe's origins based on the existence of the primordial lake Anavatapta. The lake Anavatapta, which is the birthplace of the Buddha and the legendary source of the four great rivers of Asia, that is to say, the Indus, the Ganges, of course, the Brahmaputra, and the Satluj. So this mythical lake has been associated with Lake Manasarovar in Tibet. So, for instance, Japanese Buddhist cartography invented from the 15th century a tradition of cartography centered on India. Okay? Japanese cartography invented a new tradition centered on India, as seen, for example, on the screen in this Gotenjikutsu. That means maps of the 5 regions of India. This is a Japanese map. And from the 18th century, in fact, you can find this kind of teardrop-shaped representation of Asia. And this map became the model for many subsequent maps which place precisely Lake Anavatapta or the Mount Meru at the heart of the cosmos, while integrating the Japanese archipelago into the margins of the civilized world. So you can see here the 4 great rivers on these Japanese Buddhist maps, and the contribution of Western cartography can be seen in another Japanese Buddhist cartography illustrated by the Nasenbushu Bankoku Shoka No 2. This is the map of all the countries of the universe, a word map, drawn by the very famous monk Rokashi Zotan, and first published in 1709, the monk Zotan reportedly compiled 102 documents, including amounts of pilgrimages to India, Chinese treatises, and accounts of travels to the West. In the course of making this map, the universe here is centered on the whirling lake Anavatapta. You see at the very center of this map. So the map sorry. The map highlights the Indian continent, China, Korea, Japan, maritime Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world. Sorry. Sorry about that. There's a little problem with the PowerPoint. Okay, so they lost. Okay, we lost just a few images. So okay, so on this map here. Oh. It's blocked. Yeah. Okay. So sorry about that. So on this map, the map by Zotan, you can see the diverse region of the world. But what is interesting in this map is that the world is insularized. You know, is fragmented into a vast numbers of islands. And for instance, Africa appears as a small island. Zotan divided America into two parts. The northern part of the continent lies above Japan, while the insular thought lies below. So this map of Zotan was very popular, and it was in fact distributed in all Japanese schools during the 19th century. And on this focus of these Zotan maps, you can discover the representation of Europe. On the left of the map, you can see the European archipelago and distinguishes England, France, Holland, Hungary, Italy, and even Albania. So Chinese and Korean maps generally adopt a different center. It's not, you know, the Mount Meru or a lake in Tibet. They adopt a center located in the north of the Tibetan plateau. This is the Kunlun Mountains, Kunlun. The Kunlun Mountains is the axis mundi of Chinese cartography and Chinese mythology, around which the sun and moon revolve. In Taoist cosmography, the Kunlun Mountains form the pillar of heaven where the Queen Mother of the West, Shi Wangmu, lives in her jade palace. On its slopes grow the herbs of immortality and the peaches of longevity. So the Chinese-Korean maps reflect both the influence of Taoism on a Buddhist cosmographic base and a geographical sinocentrism evidenced by the presence of a central medallion of Zhonghuo. Zhonghuo is the Middle Kingdom. Zhonghuo means China. This is particularly true of the maps known as Shuando. Shuando is the most famous Chinese and Korean map. And Shuando was distributed from the 17th century in print through manuscripts, and it is illustrating this Chinese and Korean tradition, which is directly inspired by Chinese literary sources such as the Shanghai Jing. The Shanghai Jing is the most famous geographical book. It means Book of Mountains and Seas, and this book recorded many names of places, both real and mythical. So the form of this map combines the central continents and all the place names of the western regions, which represented Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent, and as well the mythical lands surrounding the outer ocean. And this resembles the ancient Chinese cosmographies with the round sky, with the round skies, and as you can notice on this screen, you can see around the round sky the square Earth. So this map draws an Asia world centered on the East Asian continent, of course centered on China, centered on the Mount Kunlun, which corresponds to the number 6 at the very center of this image, with a peninsula that seems to outline the tributary kingdoms of Vietnam. Vietnam is represented by the number 22, and you can find Korea, which is the number 13, and Japan, another tributary kingdom of China, at the number 14. And beyond the tributary kingdoms of China, you can find India. India, which correspond to the number 19. To the number 19, just on the left side. And the so-called countries of the Western region, located in number 18. So this vast continent is surrounded by a sea and itself bordered by a mythical continent and circled by an outer ocean. And we can notice the mention of mythical lands like the land of giants at number 3 on the far right, or the land of Cyclops, the number 5 in the very northeast, or the land of women. You know, the women are compared to monsters in this cartography, at the number 10 on the far left. So the Chinese-Korean cosmographic tradition continued until, that's very important, this cartography, this map, continued until the end of the 19th century. They were printed and they were distributed in schools until the end of the 19th century, despite the progress of Chinese scientific cartographies inspired by the Western paradigm. So another example here of very ancient East Asian cartography. This is the map Seiki no Chizu, the map of China and westward, reproduced here on the screen, dating from the end of the 8th century. The end of the 8th century AD, and it depicts the 22 countries established on the Eurasian continent at the time. And it is, in fact, this map displays the territories of 22 countries in a very simplified rectangular form, and the name of these countries were noted down in both Chinese and Tibetan characters. So you can find, for example, India or Persia or the Islamic Caliphate, for instance. And it is still unknown who drew the map, but there is a strong possibility that it was drawn by a Buddhist monk. So, in fact, it is unclear where the last copy of this map is kept now, and we can only provide this very blurred photography of the last copy of this map, but it is nevertheless pieces of great value as a map of the world of the Tang Dynasty. So, in East and South Asian cartographic traditions, what is perhaps most striking is that maps seem to be designed as works of art. East Asian cartography makes use of the techniques of painting, drawing, calligraphy, and probably has more in common with these arts than with the codes and standards of European cartography. So you can find maps on, I don't know, tankas, the Tibetan Buddhist paintings on textile. You can find it on tapestry. You can find it on fan like this in the Japanese tradition. And there is a wide variety of supports, including porcelain, mother of pearl, screens, kakimono, and tsuba. You know tsuba, this is the sword endwards. And this is, you can see that on the screen. Usually there is a tradition to draw maps on tsuba in Japan. So many practices rarely found elsewhere in the world. So, in fact, we could focus exclusively on the entertaining aesthetics of these Asian maps. When you face with images of indigenous Asian maps that sometimes seems to echo medieval European maps, you might hastily deduce by noting their apparent weaknesses that Asian cartography only reached through modernity after its encounter with Western expansion during the 17th and 18th century. But in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Certain Asian cartographic traditions reveal an extraordinary scientific modernity. Here is an example. The map of Hue. The map of Hue is attributed to the legendary King Hugh the Great, and it mentioned more than 500 mountains and 300 rivers in great detail. So, according to accounts of cartographic practices in the Tang period, the central imperial power ordered thousands of maps to be produced by provincial scholars. And this is the most striking example of Chinese medieval modernity because, in fact, the countless works drawn on bamboo, on wood, on paper, on silk have all disappeared. Only the maps engraved on stone, engraved on stele, still bear witness to their unique richness. For example, here, this U map is carved on a 1 meter high stele, which was made, as you can see, it was made in 1136, and it's made from a model designed during the 10th century, and it's using a grid of squares, a grid of 100 squares, each square made around 50 kilometers. And this technique, very modern technique, was probably invented in China more than a millennium earlier. No, nowadays this very precious stele, is housed in the stele forest of Beijing Museum in Xi'an in China. This map shows the outline of coast and lakes, as well as the courses of rivers in extraordinary detail, containing more than 500 places names and 80 river names. These works is distinguished by the accuracy of the distance represented. For instance, it was studied by the mathematicians and engineers of Gogol, and for 37 points correspond exactly to the satellite coordinates of the Google Earth software. So that's incredible. The British scientist and sinologist Joseph Needham commented on the U-map, saying that, I quote him, "Anyone who compares this map with the contemporary production of European religious cosmography cannot be amazed at the extent to which Chinese geography was at that time ahead of the West." So, in fact, for instance, no great power in Europe or in the Arab world could compete with the cartographic precision of the scholars of the Middle Kingdom. So, what is interesting for us as well is that numerous copies of these maps circulated within the Chinese Empire, because this cartographic stele was installed in the courtyard of each school, of each academy in China, in the empire, so that students and scholars and visitors could copy. They could make their own copy by making a stamping with simple paper and ink. So similar steles are found in other schools, and you can notice that China then constituted a unique laboratory for experimenting new techniques. So we can see another example of cartographic modernity in other parts of Asia. This is the Pacific Ocean. And what is interesting in this map, made in the Marshall Islands, these maps were traditionally made in the middle of the Pacific Ocean until the very beginning of the 20th century. For instance, this map was found by a European colonizer at the very beginning of the 20th century. But they used this for centuries, the Micronesians people. And in fact, this map is made with coconut wood stamps and shells. This is called the stick shards. And these stick shards conceal knowledge about currents, about winds and stars, for a long time ignored by European science. And this map abstractly represents the refraction, the reflection and diffraction of waves in order to locate islands out of sight. out of sight of the sailors. It enables sailors to locate the different islands with shells, and it indicates the sea routes using roads and nodes. And these stick shots, these maps, were the essential tools used by the Austronesians. The Austronesians who, left the region of Taiwan to colonize the entire Pacific Ocean during the first millennium. And we forgot that Austronesians are history's greatest colonizers, even if the British don't like it, because they think that they are the first one. So, another cartographic innovation actually often manifests itself in the maritime domain. At the beginning of the 17th century, the Chinese published one of the most ambitious oceanographic documents of the time. This is the Wu Beiji. Wu Beiji, the treatise on armament technology, published by Mao Yuanimi in 1621. This is a work resulting from the travels of the Admiral Zheng He. The Admiral Zheng He traveled from Nanjing to Southeast Asia. 9 more minutes and then we open. Okay. Okay, so we have to stop here and to begin the Q&A if you have questions. If you don't have questions, I have a lot of things to say. No, please.
I have a question. Sir, I have a question here. I have a question. The word Asia came from my information. The continent Asia, came from a semi-Mongolic tribe called Asi, who were populating Central Asia. And this Asi and the area of Asi became Asia. That's what I heard. They were the ancestors of Chinese and the Japanese, in a way, partly of India also. Their descendants are living in Himalayas also. You have anything to say about it?
Sorry, come again for the first part of your question. The word Asia would come from which word? Asi? Asi, which is from which language? In Central Asia. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. It comes from the Hittite. It's people from Western Asia, Central Asia. Yeah, you're right. And it means at this time, during the first millennium before Christ, it means Anatolia. So West Asia. This is our West Asia. And then the Greeks transformed the meaning of this word Assuwa, A-S-S-U-W-A, into Asia, and Asia became a new geographical category, but also a divinity. For the Greeks, for Herodotus and so on, Asia is the cousin of Europe. The cousin of So then it became a new geographical category to designate the Far East, all the whole Asia. So you're right.
Est-ce que les projections cartographiques de l'Asie de l'époque utilisaient les connaissances en astronomie?
Yes, You're right. The Asian cartography used a lot of knowledge of cosmographical knowledge and astronomical knowledge as well. For instance, these maps, the Wu Beiji, were inspired, as I said, by the travels of these very famous Chinese admiral, eunuch, Muslim admiral Zheng He, who made 7 travels from China to the Red Sea, to Africa, but also to Southeast Asia. And Chinese cartographers were very inspired by these travels and the diaries made at this occasion, and they conceived these oceanographic documents. But in these documents, there are a lot of astronomical knowledge, you know? So that's a very good example of the way they mixed astronomical knowledge, but also oceanographic knowledge, nautical sciences, etc., etc. So you're right. And thank you for the question in French, in a perfect French. More perfect than my English, or than my Malayalam, of course. So perhaps if you don't have any question, I can perhaps take just a few minutes to talk about now, or we finish the... Just to show... there is another question? Oh, sorry.
So I'm a sociology student, and I want to ask about in a society where when we see the post-colonialism effect and critiquing about colonialism, still we are following a Eurocentric idea of solutions about it. Like if you are saying about gender roles, like post-colonialism feminists actually says about the gender roles that the unequalness of feminism or the ideas are produced in the colonized societies. So when we are looking at the when we are at the same time criticizing the colonizing ideas and still following the ideas of a Eurocentric ideas as a solutions, then I think there is a dilemma here. Our societies, when we are looking back to our culture, our heritage, everything, we are seeing it in a lens of as a Eurocentric perspective. Like it's when we are presenting an art or when we are presenting some cultural things, we are seeing that we are presenting something which is in the past. Like the anthropologists in their initial period, they viewed the humans as the other people, not something that we are also a part of. So I think when speaking about solutions of decolonizing the minds, I would say that every society has must look into it, their past and their culture, not in the way of a Eurocentric perspective. What's your words on that?
Thank you. That's very interesting. I totally agree. I totally agree. That's what we call the global history, and the main goal of global history is to decenter our gaze and to shift perspective and to focus on vernacular archives and sources. So I totally agree with what you said. And I mean, Indian intellectuals showed the way and paved the way for that, you know, many years ago. I'm thinking about the, perhaps, you know, of course, the subaltern studies and the post-colonial studies in India and in the Indian diaspora. So you're right. And but there are a lot of work to do now. So perhaps you have to stay in for the next discussion, because we will talk about this question of how to write history. So you have to stay here, and we will talk about this question in just a few seconds. Okay? So thank you and stay here.